Every day we make choices. We make choices on which lessons to run. We make choices on which students to group, how to set up the desks. We make choices on what the assessment looks like. So many choices we teachers make in a day, and unfortunately we don't have the time to sit down and work out the details of what the effect of certain choices we have. Sometimes we just run by default. In this video, what we're going to talk about, why do we make certain choices, how to make better choices so that you and your students are set up for success. So stick around, here we go. Hey there, Math Moment Makers. John here from Make Math Moments. And if you have not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, hit that button right now so that you get notifications when we have new videos. In this video, we're going to talk about choices, and in particular, a book that we've read, we've used to help make better choices in our classroom. It's a book on behavioral science by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. It is called Nudge. It is a phenomenal book for making good decisions. It gives you the background on why certain decisions are made, because all the decisions that are presented to you for you to make, there's some bias happening in there that persuades you to choose one over the other. There's a lot of thinking that goes into how we set up decisions for other people to make. So if you're in charge of making decisions, then you are what we call a choice architect. So we read this book called Nudge. Now there's a first edition and this final edition. Basically what Thaler and Sunstein argue is that everyone who makes designs systems for people to make choices in, there's certain ways to make it favor one choice over the other, and we actually can't help it. And we can capitalize on this if we want to reward certain behavior. If we want to push one behavior over another, then this book teaches us how to actually make that happen. And we teachers make a lot of decisions. So let's just I'm going to dive in here. But basically what Thaler and Sunstein say is a nudge, a push in the right direction is an element of choice architecture. You can choose how to set up that system so that you nudge someone in the way that you want them to be nudged. So the big question is you have to kind of ask yourself, if you were making a system, if you're making decisions, you want to ask yourself, well, what behavior is favorable in this situation? And if you can decide, I'd like this behavior to happen over this behavior, if I want this outcome to happen versus this outcome, then you are a choice architect, and you can design this system to try to nudge one choice over the other. And the biggest thing that comes out of this book, with many, many examples, is this idea of just make it easy for the favorable outcome. That's how we can make good systems to nudge our students, nudge our colleagues in favorable ways that will kind of push them down a path to have this great behavioral thing that we want to happen. We make it easy for the right behavior to come out. So for example, here's a couple of examples, just going to wrap your head around nudging in these choice architectures. So for example, when you go to a restaurant, you'll notice this in the last few years when you're paying with your card at the restaurant, when they bring you that machine and you type it in, what do you notice that happens? I noticed this, is what happens up on the screen is you got this receipt, and in the receipt, you've got options. You can just click a button for the tip. You don't have to calculate the tip. They have calculated the tip for you so that it's easy for you to just click a button. And notice on this receipt, there is no option for lower than 15%. Usually you'd have to click another button to enter in your own tip. I've seen receipts that start at 18% and go higher from there. What the behavior that the restaurant owner or the restaurant business has decided is they want the tipping higher amounts to be the favorable outcome. And so what they do is they only put these tips on there because it's easier for you to click one of these options than for you to type in your own. They're pushing you, they're nudging you to choose one of these preset default options. Default is a big piece of the book, because if you have a default option, most people, because it's easy to just leave the default, always select the default. And there's studies to show that defaults are the easier choice, the more picked choice. And you get to choose defaults if you are the choice architect. So with receipts, these were the defaults, and so more people will tip higher when you're presented with these options. Here's another one. This community was looking to change how much recycling was being done in their community center, and versus how much garbage that they had to throw out. And so what they did is, to help nudge people into the recycling and choose the right option, they labeled their containers recycle and then landfill. So it's like a nudge to say, look, you can recycle, or you are sending all of these things to the landfill. Like saying landfill instead of garbage gives off this image that you're actually building up this like pile of garbage. And that image is kind of like, I don't want that image. So people are more opt to recycle instead of throwing it in the landfill. So they're nudging people to kind of put in the recycle, make sure they think about it instead of just throwing it in the garbage. And also the sizes of the holes are purposely created. They're using choice architecture to purposely create those sizes to make you think, okay, I'll put this over here instead of over here. That choice architecture is present in tons of things. One that I've noticed recently, I guess in the last few years, is in, say, technology and like educational technology. And I want to bring one that I found was really, really cool for you. One, kids are using their cell phone calculators quite often. And one thing that I feel like they get confused about is the percent button on the cell phone calculator. Kids will be like, okay, well, I'm going to click 15%, and I put 15 and then percent, and then is the number the answer, or do I have to multiply? It's like confusing about when do I hit the percent button and when I multiply with the percent button. So there's and it's not clear to students of what's actually happening in the background. I'm going to go to desmos.com and I'm going to head to their calculator. Now you can go to their graphing calculator. Over on the side here, watch what Desmos has purposely chosen to try to make it easy for students to understand how to use the percent calculation, like how to find percents of numbers. That's the behavior that's being rewarded here, or nudged in the right way. Is you got to understand how, like, what are we doing when we take percents of numbers? So I'm going to bring up the keyboard here at the bottom and watch this. There it is, 15%. But watch this. Whoa, did you see that? Like, look up here, 15%. Let me get rid of the percent. And then they say 15%. Let me get back to the percent. It says percent of. Like, Desmos has purposely chosen to write percent of and then leave a cursor to say, and then look you can't just leave it like that. You can't just say 15%. You have to say 15% of, and then you could say 50 and then hit equals, or just and it shows you the answer here. Like, Desmos has used choice architecture to nudge kids in the right way to go, look, if you're going to use the percent button, you have to find a percent of a number. That's how we want to think of this. That's the calculation that we're trying to make here. So super, super cool by Desmos. Some other examples, choice architecture is in lesson design. A lot of times we have to make choices about what questions to use. Like, how do we set up our lessons? A lot of the times we will kind of, put up this lesson. Let's get into a lesson, because usually we don't think about the starts of lessons or the ends of lessons. You're a choice architect because you are choosing how to present the material. You're choosing how to have students engage in these math concepts. One question that we get often is, how can I get students to use mathematical models more often in their solutions? A lot of times we'll be doing a multiplying question, and students will say, I can just do that. I can just do 3 times 8. I don't know. I don't know why I have to draw a picture for 3 times 8, or something similar. And what we can do if we want to nudge kids in the right way to use mathematical models to represent their thinking, we can make it easy for them. We can design how that lesson looks. We can design the questioning around that, by modeling that solution for them. Right now, I am in the woolly worms race task, which is on fractions. And in this task, students are asked to see who's the winner and by how much, and they have to figure out which fraction is the biggest. So there's a moment here where you're asking students to figure out which is the largest number, who went the furthest, but you're gonna want to nudge kids to use models to help you out, because we want to use models in lots of different places. And so kids might be able to just know which one's bigger on number lines, or maybe you want to use a bar model. But if you model it, and this is why we put solutions in here, is because we can take the lead, and when we consolidate, we can actually ask kids to explain their strategy, and then we model it for them on the boards. And then we can say, like, do you see your thinking in here? Can you see how you compared these fractions to how I've compared these fractions on the board? And right now we're going to show you a clip. Kyle and I just recently did a podcast episode where we talked about this modeling for kids and nudging them in the right way. We're going to show you a clip here just to show you how to kind of set that up and nudge kids down that right path.
I looked at it as, well, if there's 3 rows of 8 chocolates in each row, they were like, I'm going to skip count by 8s. And I'm like, oh, great. Can you do that for me? And the student's like 8. And then they kind of pause, 16,
right,
24. And okay, so there is my moment where I get the opportunity to try to get this model to sort of emerge. Even though the student didn't say, hey, draw me a rectangle, what I ended up doing was, okay, you said 3 rows. Is it okay if I draw 3 rows like this? And then what would I do to do your skip counting? And then the student tells me, well, you'd put like 8 in the first row, and then you do 8 in the next row, 8 in the next row, so it's like we breadcrumb them from, oh, here's your strategy. You started with absolutely, really, like, you didn't even think about a strategy, but I've helped breadcrumb you along so that now we've got you to essentially an array, but we're going to eventually leave the actual dots behind. This is just sort of like to get people kind of visualizing the box.
Yeah.
And then we're going to continue, and then hopefully they'll be able to leverage the strategy. The way I used to teach was, I'm going to define what an array is. I'm going to, when we multiply, we draw it this way, but really what I've done is I'm taking your voice and I'm going to try to represent your thinking using this model. So I have a very intentional purpose here, much like when we do a problem-based lesson, we have models in mind, we have strategies in mind. So I'm going to try to help kind of pave this path and get students thinking. And then after too, we're going to ask the student, like, does this represent your thinking? Like, can you see your thinking in this model? So it's like the questioning is very intentional, not to say, is this how you did it? Because I know the answer is no, because the student said, I just know it's 24. But now we've sort of given them the opportunity to go, do you see your thinking here? And now it's like, they're like, well, yeah, I do see it. And then you can ask another student for another strategy, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so in that video, you just saw that when we were doing 3 times 8, kids would say, I got the answer of 24, but we would set up the diagram. We could set up the model and say, do you see your thinking here? Can you see how the rows and the columns relate to how you've multiplied? It's a nudge, because we're trying to show kids that the behavior that we're looking for, the favorable behavior, is to use a model. And by us modeling it, the next time students are asked to model or asked to solve a problem, they will be that breadcrumb will have kind of been there for them, and then they can start to draw more models. They will draw a model the next time, and the more you model it, the more comfortable it will be in that class. That's a choice that we are making as educators to kind of nudge kids down different paths that we think are are favorable. Choice architecture is something that you are doing every day. The big idea here is to think about what choices I'm making for my students and what outcomes are going to come out of that, and how can I think about those choices for my students so that it produces the outcome I want, the behavior that I want, and how can I make it easy for students to like select that behavior. That's the challenge. How are you going to do that? I'd love to hear about any choice architecture you're making in your class. Hit the messages below. Let me know about it. And I'll see you next time. Take care.